I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo. Good afternoon, Columbus. And hello to those of you on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my fantastic co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, and together Rebecca and I are about to craft an unforgettable hour of radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment. And we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your families, and the earthworms that are coming out of the ground because it's been too much rain, and the birds that are eating the earthworms, and the birds of prey that are eating the little birds that are eating the earthworms, and basically everybody and everything, because, like it or not, we're all wrapped up together on this wonderful little planet called Earth. And we have a wonderful show for you today. Lots of good news today. I decided to do a good news show. We're going to chat just for the next 5 minutes or so, and then we're going to, unfortunately, then we have a kind of a sad interview. We're going to go talk to Jennifer Wilber, who is one of the many, many people who have been laid off from the federal government by the whole DOGE process. This is a woman who was in environmental education in a federally funded program that just got axed. Then it'll be advertisers and patrons. And then we will talk with Rebecca. What will you be talking about today, Rebecca?
Oh, I will be talking about white violets.
White violets. All right.
Yes.
So that'll...
AKA Canadian violets.
Oh. So that'll lighten the mood back up again. All right.
One assumes they are lighter than the purple violets. So
Yes.
literally, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And then it's ecological news. And hopefully at some point during this hour, we'll hear from you at 877-909-1007. That's 877-909-1007. Talk about you can call about any sort of ecological or environmental thing that you're worried about these days or concerned about or that you're happy about. You know, like if you just saw a bald eagle the other day and you wanted to share with somebody, we'll listen. Give us a call. 877-909-1007. So, as I promised, this is a good news show, and I am in a really good mood because regular listeners know that every time a nuclear plant closes, I allow myself a day of just unbridled joy. I'm like, yeah. Well, what just happened down under, down in Australia, they just blocked 7 nuclear plants because what happened is they had their national elections, and the Conservative Party, which actually, okay, this is like a Southern Hemisphere thing, like the drains swirling in the opposite direction. The party that's conservative is called the Liberal Party. Okay, so Rebecca's nodding her head. I think we're getting it. So the conservatives down there based their whole campaign on nuclear power. They're like, we're going to revamp Australia. We'll forget this wind and solar stuff. we're going to, in about 10 years, we're going to manage to build 7 nuclear plants, and it's going to use all our power needs, and it's only going to cost $600 billion in yeah,
Yay.
Australian dollars, but still, that's a lot. And and this was backed by they've got a billionaire down there. Her name's Gina. She's a coal baroness, and she is good buddies with Rupert Murdoch and the entire Murdoch media ecosphere.
Because of course she is.
Yes, because all those billionaires get together and stuff. So, so it looked for a while there like this was going to succeed. That the chief conservative guy, his name is Peter Dutton, was out there just making all the usual lies about nuclear power, saying, "Oh, it's safe. Oh, it'll if you parse it out over 100 years, which is how long these nuke plants will last, it's the cheapest, and it's clean. It only makes a Coke can full of nuclear waste every 10 years or so." All these ridiculous lies that the nuclear people just repeat over and over again. And what happened is that the actual liberals, this is actually the Labor Party. The Labor Party did not back down from any of those outrageous lies.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, here in the U.S., the Democrats, went nuclear with Biden. They were like, "Oh, all of the above, all energy is cool and wonderful," and of course, it's not. Some energy sources are definitely more evil than others, but the Democrats here couldn't do that. But the liberals down there, the Labor Party, they just stood right up to Murdoch. They stood up to the billionaires. They stood up and said, "No, look, it's the most expensive power ever devised. It's incredibly dangerous." And Peter Dutton says he's going to build 7 nuclear plants in 10 years. But he in his riding, the local area he represented as a representative in Parliament, he had been trying to build a bridge there for 10 years and was like so incompetent and so corrupt that like they kept doing bids and it's like, we're going to do a study and then we're going to do another study. And my buddy here who has a consulting firm is going to do a third study, in other words,
sell your boats just yet.
Yeah. In other words, he's completely incompetent. And so the difference between the U.S. and Australia was that the liberals didn't back down. They stuck to their guns. They said, "No, we're going alternative energy. We're going wind. We're going solar. We're going battery, and that's how we're going to get to zero carbon. And we're going to stick with this plan." And so this was an amazing election for a number of reasons. One, it's the first time in like 80 years that Australia has re-elected their prime minister. Yeah, that just never happens down there. Anthony Albanese has been elected for a second term, and Australians are notorious for not being happy with their prime ministers and replacing them every chance they could get.
They're like the Browns with their entire football team, especially the quarterback.
Right. Yeah. So it's also kind of amazing in that, Murdoch, it has been said that he has complete control, like thought control over Australia because he has so many media outlets there and they all do exactly what he tells them. And he told them to go big on the nuclear, but the information kept getting out.
Yeah, somehow. Yep.
Yeah. And there was actually a group down there called Juice Media that did just this scathing satire on the whole nuclear question that was just like, it was hilarious. I can't play it on the air because it's full of F-bombs, but it was just, they just took every single one of these false claims and just said, but here's the, here's what he really means. And it was, so I'm just a little giddy. I don't know if you could tell. So this is really great news. Some other interesting differences between the Australian elections and ours is that they have nationally they use the ranked choice voting system, which means they had 8 candidates for prime minister that represented 8 different parties. And so what you do to vote in that situation is you number them 1 through 8. In other words, your first choice, your second choice, and and so many people put Peter Dutton, the quote unquote Liberal Party guy, last. So many people gave him number 8 on their 1 through 8 voting that he actually lost his riding. He got kicked out of Parliament,
Oopsie-doodle.
which is massively embarrassing for somebody who was running to be prime minister.
Tisk tisk, poor fellow.
Yeah, and so it was just. I was watching this election very closely going in because it really was a referendum on nuclear power as much as it was a vote. And of course, the Trump effect helped too, just like with Canada's election, because Peter Dutton modeled himself after Trump and said, "I will be Australia's Trump." And he had, make Australia great again. They had MAGA down there too, just like we've got MAGA up here. But I think part of what happened is that Trump, by being so outrageously horrible, kind of made, once the main lie of nuclear power got busted there in Australia, I think everybody kind of went, oh, you know what? I bet they're lying about this thing too. And they're probably lying about that. And the whole
What do
house
you
of
know?
cards just collapsed because the biggest lie, the strategy of the big lie is you have to get everybody to believe the big lie. Like Trump's big lie about having the election fraudulent in 2020. That was the big lie that was the base for him convincing everybody else to vote for him in 2024. Or not everybody, a minority of people, but a big enough minority to win the election. But for the Liberal Party down in Australia, the big lie was nuclear power. And once that got debunked, all of their lies collapsed. People stopped believing them about everything. And poor Rupert Murdoch is crying in his martinis. I'm so, like I say, I'm just about giddy. Unfortunately, the U.S. media is not handling this very well. They are not reporting the nuclear power aspect to it. I mean, it was literally the central issue of the Australian campaign. But I just read an article about it in CNN, and it said 5 takeaways from the Australian election. They never mentioned nuclear power. And the U.S. media is really failing us in a whole bunch of ways. I mean, one of the main ways is that they're treating all these horrible things that Trump is doing, they're sort of just reporting on them neutrally, like they're not insane. Trying to claim Canada as the 51st state is insane, and that's partly why the Canadian elections turned out the way they did. But, you don't hear that. You don't hear that on the evening news. President Trump today made an insane assertion that Canada will become the 51st state. I mean, if they were truly impartial, that's how they would report it. But they're not truly impartial. They're sort of partial to the powers that be. And so that's kind of disappointing. And one of the ways that the U.S. media has been failing is the full reporting on the effects of these DOGE layoffs. Department of Government. They are reporting on it. They're saying, oh, they're cutting here, they're cutting there, they're cutting here, but they're not really telling us the whole.
We're just going to call it the Department of Government F.
Okay, F like the Scrabble word F.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So what's happened so far, okay, you probably don't know this, but according to Wikipedia, and they had, citations, so far DOGE has fired 275,000 people, which, you can't take that huge a chunk out of the U.S. economy.
Yeah, a friend of mine, actually my roommate, who's involved in one of her in some veterans post service support groups. Yeah, she one of her friends in one of her groups that she met has terminal cancer, and her husband is about to get fired from the government for what he does.
And so no health insurance.
Yeah.
Wow. So, yeah, and these kinds of stories are happening all over the country by the hundreds of thousands, and we're not really I think the mainstream media can be called sort of complicit in covering up the scale of this disaster. So I wanted to find somebody who had been affected by this, somebody specifically in the environmental arena, because that's one of the areas that's been hit hardest by these cuts, is protecting the environment. And so I was fortunate to land an interview with this very nice woman, Jennifer Wilber. So let's go to that interview now. Hello, and welcome to For a Green Future. Could you please tell us your name and what the program you were with was?
Hey, my name is Jennifer Wilber, and I was an AmeriCorps member serving in the Now Corps program. And on Sunday, I found out that my program, along with about 1,000 other state and national, as well as Vista AmeriCorps programs, had been cut. And this all came shortly after all of the NCCC AmeriCorps programs were shut down.
So what you found out, how exactly did you find out? And then was that it? You found out Sunday. Were you gone by Monday?
Yes, well, technically, our last date was considered a Friday, so any hours that members served over the weekend were not counted. I found out after I saw some posts on Reddit and Facebook talking about all the programs that were cut, and my program was one of the ones that were listed. And since I was supposed to go and serve at an event on Sunday, I texted my program advisor, who apparently didn't know anything about these cuts yet. So, and she told me to go ahead and serve anyway. But then, like within a half hour or so of that, she texted me again saying, like, no, don't serve. And we'll have more information soon. So we got like the official email later that day.
Wow. So not really even informing the supervisors, the people that are like on the ground doing the work. So could you go into a little more detail about the work you were doing? What were you doing for AmeriCorps?
Okay, so the program I was with was called Now Corps, the Northern Ohio Watershed Corps, which was sponsored by Tinkers Creek Watershed Partners. And we did things like a variety of conservation projects. We had members doing ecological restoration, land conservation, restoring wetlands, removing invasives, planting trees, monitoring water quality in local waterways, and cleaning up streams and parks. My role is mainly focused on education and outreach. I served at the Cuyahoga Soil and Water Conservation District as their youth environmental educator. So I did things like provide educational programming related to protecting our soil and waterways in school classrooms and in other places in the community, such as libraries.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you folks were doing very direct work that had like immediate impact on improving the environment.
Mm-hmm. We had a lot of members that did direct work in conservation, and members like me who did more education and outreach kind of things. And then even us that did the education side of things, we were still involved in events like cleaning up the local parks and doing wetlands restorations and hands-on things like that.
Uh-huh. So supposedly what DOGE is doing is ending, quote, waste, fraud, and abuse, unquote. Did you see any of that in your time at AmeriCorps?
Not at all.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was doing great work. They were all doing what they were supposed to do. The program seemed to be run very well. I didn't see any waste or fraud or anything like that.
You mentioned that other people in your AmeriCorps section, have you heard other stories of people that have lost their jobs from this DOGE cutting?
I know that there's been about 1,000 of the AmeriCorps programs that were cut recently. And within my group, I know that people are really struggling because we didn't have any prior notice, and there's people who moved in from out of state to be part of this program, and they were suddenly left without jobs. So now people are wondering how they're going to pay their rent. It's just a huge mess.
How does AmeriCorps work exactly? I mean, I know it's a volunteer program, but you do get some stipends, or what exactly? How does
Yes,
it work?
we're officially classified as volunteers, but we also get a very modest living stipend so that we're able to do the work while also serving. So we're essentially full-time government workers, but without any of the protections that official employees get, like unemployment benefits. So none of the over 32,000 displaced AmeriCorps members are eligible for unemployment benefits after we were all fired with no warning.
Hmm. Wow, that's terrible. And as I said, you were doing work that was directly helping the environment. And so there was there's some value that for the work you were doing that is now going to be lost, right? You were physically
Yes.
improving the environment.
Mm-hmm. And my role was specifically with education. So in our biggest program that we did at my host site was called NUTS, which is Native Urban Tree Starters. It
Hmm.
involved having several visits to participate in classrooms to take students through the whole process of growing native trees. We
Mhm.
did red oaks this year, and we've walked them through from finding the acorns, growing a seedling that they can then later plant in the community to help restore the urban tree canopy in Cleveland. So
Wow.
people don't really think about how important trees are, especially in urban settings. But having a healthy urban tree canopy is important for reducing the urban heat island effect, reducing air pollution, and more trees means that there's less stormwater runoff, less flooding, less pollution that makes its way into Lake Erie.
Mhm.
And the trees provide habitats for wildlife and promote biodiversity. Plus, more trees in the urban environment also has economic advantages for the city as well. They encourage people to do outdoor activities, increase property values. They can increase foot traffic that attracts new business to an area. An area that is more pleasant to spend time in is a lot better for economic growth.
Mhm.
And since they reduce summer heat, that reduces energy consumption for cooling systems. So planting more trees in these areas doesn't only benefit nature, it also benefits the economy.
Right.
Mhm.
And I've planted a few trees in my day, and I'm I'm in my 60s now, but I can look back at some of the trees I planted 40 years ago that are looking pretty nice and pretty healthy right now. And you're doing that with children. I mean, you're sort of creating that connection between nature and children. That must have been very satisfying.
Yeah, I feel like environmental education is super important for young children, especially because it kind of lays the groundwork for them to start caring about protecting the environment when they get older and become adults. 'Cause
Mhm.
today's children are tomorrow's voters and policymakers. So
Mhm.
you want to instill that love of nature early and teach them about ways that they can have a direct impact.
Right. And you've got to put down the cell phone to plant the tree too. So
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, I mostly worked with younger kids. Like, for that program, it was like grades 3 to 5, so they weren't super into phones yet.
did any like experiences you had with those kids strike you particularly? Was there any kind of special event or anything that happened that you remember?
I just remember how they were so excited to plant their trees. Like they'd want to name them and everything. You're so excited to see them start to grow and feel like they were actually making an impact. And aside from the tree program, I also started a new pilot program in my position for younger kids because my previous background was with early childhood, and the soil and water districts didn't really have any programming for this age range yet. So I started developing a program to teach the younger kids how to set up a worm bin for their classrooms. I aligned this with the kindergarten through second grade standards. And I just kind of walk them through how they can make worm bins, and then they can learn how animals such as worms impact and change their environments, and also learn about the benefits of composting and how it can contribute to waste reduction and building healthy soils. And those kids were just so super excited to like just play with the worms and learn about them.
Mm-hmm. So what exactly does a worm bin do?
It's a way to compost your kitchen scraps and plant trimmings and things like that. You use worms to they just eat your garbage and then produce the castings that you can use in your garden as compost
Hmm.
and make your soils more healthy.
Hmm. So, I mean, this situation for you, unfortunately, and the other AmeriCorps volunteers is part of a bigger picture in terms of the federal government sort of stepping back from roles it's had promoting positive environmental things. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the people in my program and all the other programs provided essential services for the environmental sector, services that help to keep our planet safe, healthy, and habitable for generations to come. I think it's just terrible that they are cutting all of these programs just so that rich people can make more money.
Hmm.
And it wasn't just AmeriCorps that was affected, because I heard that DOGE has already made cuts to the EPA and other organizations,
Mhm.
and cutting grants for climate change, environmental justice, science research.
Mhm.
And it's just a really dark day for America as a country.
This show airs initially on 100.7 FM, The Ticket in Toledo, which is an ESPN channel. And, I can say with some confidence that probably some of our listeners are people that actually voted for Donald Trump. Um, do you have anything you would say to those people right now?
I just hope that people can put aside their political affiliation, to just see what's actually going on and not think of it as like a sports team like so many people seem to view politics. So as my guy won, and yeah, I just feel like people need to take a look at the actual issues and not just keep rooting for their candidate just because that's who they voted for and they want to feel like they didn't make the wrong choice.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jennifer. I know this probably isn't an easy time or an easy interview for you. Um, is there anything you'd like to add?
I just want to add that I hope that everything works out for all of my fellow AmeriCorps members and that we're able to find future employment and hopefully stuff that we can do to continue our work in the environmental field.
Okay. Well, that was our interview. Kind of a emotional situation there for literally hundreds of thousands of Americans right now. That our heart goes out to all those people that were doing, in many cases, vital and essential work that have been simply let go. So, but now I want this, like I say, to be mostly an upbeat show today. So we're going to hear from our advertisers and patrons, which we always love hearing from them. Imagine a place where nature meets adventure, where you can climb, paddle, fish, and explore. That place, it's right here in Wood County. The Wood County Park District is here to protect, preserve, and inspire. We conserve natural and cultural treasures so you can enjoy the outdoors like never before. By maintaining green spaces, providing fun programs, restoring wildlife habitats, and leading outdoor adventures. Want to connect with nature? Try your hand at archery, bouldering, geocaching, paddling, rappelling, and more. Whether you're seeking experience or a peaceful retreat, our parks are open every day from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset all year round. Come explore, get outside, experience nature. Your parks, your adventures waiting for you. Find us online at wcparks.org or follow on Instagram, Facebook, or X, or call 419-353-1897. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, and inspiring a greener future. And, of course, our program is also brought to you by our wonderful patrons. And these are people who've gone to patreon.com. That's Patreon. There they searched for a Green Future, and up popped our wonderful Patreon page. They scrolled through looking for a level of membership that matched their budget. And once they signed up, then painlessly every month a little bit comes out of their accounts, comes over to us, and that's how we can afford to keep you on the show. Keep the show coming to you, right? Yeah. Oh, but of course you can get on the show.
Yeah.
Anybody can get on the show.
Totally.
Just call us still at 877-909-1007. We'd love to have you on the show.
No extra charge for that.
Yes, and you could thank our patrons for, being able to do that. So, okay, Rebecca, now it's time for your segment here. What are we here talking about this week?
Okay, well, on our ongoing Stuff on Becca's Lawn series, today we have white violets.
Okay.
So, turns out white violets are. I'm not sure we have any on our lawn. I think we're all dandelions. Our next door neighbor definitely, their lawn is like a quarter violets at least, including a big patch of white ones, as I recall. But yeah, and as I walk around the neighborhood, of course, I'm noticing that, as I've been noticing for most of my life, oh, there's a patch of violets. Well, that's funny. There's a couple of white ones. Wonder why. I think I always assumed that some of them just got bleached out by the soil, or they were mutations or something.
Mm-hmm.
But no, what the white violets, most of them anyway, are something called Viola canadensis, Canadian violets. They're in the violet family, and they're widespread across the U.S. and Canada, which makes sense because I remember seeing them in a couple of different states I lived as a child. So if you draw a line between Alaska and Newfoundland, that's their northern border, and they go south as far as Georgia and Arizona, coast to coast, more or less. They are a perennial herb meaning, of course, they don't have a woody stem. They have a soft stem. And just to review, perennial means it lives over 2 years, because annual means a plant only lives for 1 year and then dies and has to start all over from seed. Whereas, violets general don't do this. They don't die back because they spread by seed, and they also spread by rhizome, which is sort of a fleshy root that serves a reproductive function partially under the ground, which is where roots are, Becca, by and large. So, yeah, that was unnecessary. Whereas there's another thing called biennial, which means that they bloom and die in the second year. So first year is for growth, second year for reproduction. It's a whole nother system. So yeah, physically they have white petals with a yellow base, and sometimes they have streaks of purple, and they're also purple tinged on the back. They have heart-shaped leaves with coarse rounded teeth, and there are 2 varieties and 2 subspecies. You ask, or at least I did, what the heck is a variety versus a subspecies, Becca? Well, a variety is a naturally occurring variation within a species, whereas a subspecies is usually a distinct population within a species, which is often geographically isolated.
Aha. So like on an island or something, you might get a subspecies.
Yeah, or just, if it's separated from the rest of its subspecies by some barrier that particular organism does not like to cross, even just a climate barrier or, mountains, jungles, whatever, that it does not like that environment. So what is the difference between white violets and regular violets, you ask? Or at least I certainly did, because I didn't know. Well, they're white.
Okay.
Also, They like moister soil and they spread more slowly. So this is the thing about like regular violets is that they are sometimes classified as invasives just because they can reduce the biodiversity by spreading really fast and taking up a whole bunch of nutrients and stuff, water, sunlight, all that stuff from other plants. Whereas white violets do not have the same problem.
Oh, okay. So they're less aggressively, gorgeous looking.
They are, yeah. I still have a spot for the purple one, a soft spot for the purple ones, I gotta admit. So yeah, both types of violets are actually native. They're native.
Oh,
They have
good.
waxy leaves and are pesticide resistant, so they're dashed. You might as well not even bother trying to get rid of them anyhow. You're just going to poison everything else, and the violets are still going to be there.
Right.
And the rhizomes also make them hard to eradicate, obviously. Some of the benefits of violets in general, they attract native pollinators, and they're a habitat for wildlife, it said, which,
Tiny little wildlife.
tiny little wildlife is in fact important.
Yeah.
According to the Cleveland HoldenFG.org, the Holden Arboretum, article by Alex Fadiga, Faidiga, on 4/23/2023. They also attract they're edible. They attract a wide variety of pollinators, which is important. And they're a larval food source and shelter eggs for fritillary butterflies,
Oh.
which I think is a species. It's not. I don't know. I should look that up sometime, but I think it's a species of butterfly. And also, mining bees only visit violets.
Ah, I did not know that. Wow. Okay.
So yeah, and the bees also prefer apparently sun-warmed lawn violets over woods violets, because they're probably more fragrant and you can see them better and all that stuff. So yay, violets!
Nice.
I
Yeah.
like them a lot.
I've got a big patch in my front yard of it's just solid violet, purple violets. And
Right.
I've been
right.
mowing around it. I mow around it till the flowers are done. And
Yeah, so if you see a lot of white violets on your lawn, like a bigger patch than usual, it might be that they're just trying to compete with the blue violets, but they're not spreading as fast, or it might be that part is a little damper than the rest of your lawn, a little shady
yeah.
or something.
All right. Well, thanks, Rebecca, for that. And I'm glad to hear that violets are native. I had somehow got the impression they were invasive, but
Well, they are classified sometimes as invasive in certain areas because they can reduce biodiversity and they're very aggressive spreaders.
I see. Okay.
So invasive is not all about whether it's native or not, which is weird. I always thought of them as opposites,
Huh. Well, that kind of ties in with our first story on our ecological news segment. This is a story that's kind of interesting on BBC on April 4th of this year. And the title is, "This Hawaiian Island's Freakosystems Are a Warning from the Future."
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And this is an article all about Oahu, which is the third largest island in the Hawaiian island chain. And essentially what has happened is there the forests have been almost completely replaced by non-native species.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, specifically pepper trees, cinnamon trees, and guava trees.
My.
The pepper trees came from Brazil, the cinnamon trees from Indonesia, and the guavas from the Himalayas.
My goodness.
And they're all invasive, and so the birds that are living there are none of them are are native. They're like there's the white-eye, the red-billed Leothrix, and the red-whiskered bulbul, which is from Asia. And no honey creepers, which is
I think they got one of them in the zoo, possibly, or some kind of some
the honey
kind of
creeper or the
Bulbul?
red-whiskered bulbul.
bulbul.
Yeah, okay.
Or some kind of a bulbul.
Right. So, and it turns out that 95 of the 142 native species of birds on Oahu are now extinct. And so this was an article that it talked about the seriousness of the problem, but that the slant, the this sort of emotional overtone for it wasn't, oh, this is terrible, we need to do something about it. It was just, oh, isn't this interesting? And they kept using really positive adjectives to describe these forests, they're like these beautiful birds and these lush trees. And so it seems to be like there's actually kind of a movement now to legitimize foreign invasive species. Like I see it every year when people say, don't pull up your dandelions.
Dandelions.
Right. They're like, there's now a whole movement like, help spread dandelions. And dandelions don't need your help.
Yeah, they're doing pretty good.
They're very good at that themselves. But this article also talks about there's a whole bunch of other, more and more, there are completely alien species like taking over entire ecosystems and replacing the entire native ecosystem. Like,
and not only that, it's a Franken ecosystem at this point. It's stitched together from some very odd parts from disparate parts of the world there.
Right, and that's why they call it a Freakosystem.
Yeah.
That's the unofficial name for this.
Has more of a ring
ecosystem.
to it, I guess. Yeah.
But the official name for it, what the ecologists are starting to call it, are novel ecosystems.
Oh my.
Yeah, that's kind of a...
That's like different in the Midwestern sense, or creative in the Midwestern sense. That means you messed it up.
Yeah, right. And so that's kind of an indication of this whole movement to sort of legitimize invasiveness, to say, well, let's just let them invade. But the thing is that humans have always had an important part of their environment. They always affect the distribution of plants and stuff. And I think we still have some sort of responsibility to manage these ecosystems in a way that keeps the native species where they are, because they evolved that way. But they talk about some of the other novel ecosystems, like there's a series of salty lakes in the Netherlands that have been created by their ocean barriers. They're trying to keep the country from getting submerged by the ocean, and so their systems create these salty lakes, these extra salty lakes that are just full of complete ecosystems, but all foreign invaders. Similarly, in the Amazon, when you cut down all the trees and then you get the rain of the rainforest, it creates these watery sort of plains that are filled with invasive grasses and things instead of rainforest. And of course, one of the big problems with just sort of accepting freakosystems would say, oh, well, okay, that's just the ecosystem now. It looks like these are functioning ecosystems. That was one of the points of this, is that all the ecological jobs the different birds were doing, the native birds, they found foreign birds that are doing those jobs. But the thing is that when you have an area where all the plants and animals had evolved together cooperatively for millions of years, and then you replace them with this totally artificial freakosystem with plants and animals from all over the world, you actually don't know long term if this is going to be viable. There's so many factors in an ecosystem, so many nutrients, so many different ways that energy is transferred from here to there, so many different critters that are involved in keeping the soil fertile and making it more fertile as time goes on.
It's a little bit like if you just, removed all the cages from the zoo and just let them all go at each other.
Yeah, right. And just see which animals come out on top. Yeah.
There you go.
So just beware of that there's sort of a movement to sort of legitimize freakosystems, but I think we still have to fight that battle and try to keep the native species going.
Let's see if the polar bears like the taste of those tropical birds over there.
Right. Yeah, how do polar bears like penguins?
Yeah,
Ooh,
yeah.
I love that.
Well, we already know that.
Well, they don't. They're on opposite poles. They don't normally get to...
True. Good point. Plus, I
Yeah.
think they go after seals. Mostly they like a little bit bigger stuff than penguins anyhow.
But I'm sure a polar bear wouldn't turn down a nice penguin.
Probably not,
okay.
yeah. If it
Anyway.
really
all
fell
right.
in its lap.
Okay, next story. This one is local. Toledo Blade on April 26th. Lucky, Ohio. Legacy of Lucky. Blade testing finds high level of radioactivity in groundwater in Cold War town. And so I got to head to the Blade. This is
For those who don't know, that is where everybody goes swimming in Northwest Ohio in the summer at Lucky Quarry.
yeah, well,
Yeah, I've done it.
might not be a good idea
Yeah.
because they took 39 samples. The Blade took 39 samples from wells and businesses and schools and libraries and things. And they found that the background radiation in that water was 10 times higher than it normal. Specifically at the middle school, they found 10 times. At the library drinking fountain, they found it 45 times higher
Youch.
than normal. And at a water pump near the athletic fields, 1,700 times normal background radiation.
I think actually my my high school reunion was at Lucky Quarry, the 5-year reunion.
Ah, well, okay.
I didn't
hope you
go,
didn't drink
so I
water.
don't remember for sure.
Okay.
But yeah.
Most of what they found was bismuth 214, which is
Oh
a
my.
decay product of radon,
Oy vey.
which radon is naturally occurring. But in 2 of the wells, they found cobalt 60.
Oopsie doodle.
And that's a human-made radioisotope that you just don't find that naturally. So that means somehow something is getting into the water that we humans made. Cobalt 60 can be found in used fuel rods. So it's possible that the Lucky Fuzrap site out there, the place where they know there's radioactivity and they've been cleaning it up for almost a decade, something could have happened there at some point. They might have tried doing reprocessing of fuel rods and not told anybody. We don't know. But that Fuzrap site in Lucky is kind of interesting because we did a story on it way back in our first year. But since then, I have like a dozen times tried to reach out to the Army Corps of Engineers there to ask about that cleanup that's going on there because it's billions of dollars being spent there.
And it's a sore subject, apparently.
And they never, ever get back to me. No information officer. You know, I've actually gone into the site, and they've got little trailers there. I've gone into the trailer and handed my card to the public information officer,
Yeah.
who then never gets back to me.
And no
So-
information was made public to you.
Right. So the Army Corps is still claiming that, it's not us. It's not our site. We're
yay.
doing all. But there's going to be more testing. And it also is interesting that part of the waste at that site in Lucky is 1,000 tons of radioactive scrap from a nuclear plant in New York State that got decommissioned. But what they're doing with the Fuzrap site is they're just taking all that and trucking it up to Michigan. And so it's kind of like this is what is happening now with
Well,
nuclear
that'll
waste.
solve it. Let's just sort of spread it around.
Yeah, you
some
just
more.
put it on a truck and send it to another place, which 10
Expose
years
more
from now,
people to it.
they'll
That'll
check their wells and
how
they'll
could
be
that
like,
possibly be
what?
a problem?
How'd that cobalt 60 get there? All right. And our third story, we kind of drives this home because this is a story we've been following what's been going on down there in Piketon for quite a while at the Portsmouth Gaseous Diffusion Plant. And WKRC Local 12 down there has been doing an amazing job of following this story for years. And what they did was on April 12th, they had a town hall where they invited the people from Portsmouth and Piketon to come talk about it. And it was a very moving image because at one point, one of the speakers said, well, how many of you have either personally had cancer or had an immediate family member with cancer? And every hand in the auditorium went up,
Oh Lord.
like everybody. And so they had a whole bunch of heartbreaking stories. And there, this our good friend Vita Kali down there, you can look back at our past episodes for interviews with her, has been fighting this fight for decades. And just 2 years ago, they hired Joe Mangano to do a survey, and they found that had their area, which is contaminated with radioactivity, has the highest cancer rates in Ohio. And this article specifically mentions that leukemia and lymphoma are going at 4 times the rate among children down there. So these are the victims of the nuclear industry. When the nukesters say, oh, nobody's ever died from nuclear power. No, people are dying literally every day.
Oh, yes, they have.
All right. So, but I said we're going to be trying to do mostly upbeat news today. So back to a good story. Inside Climate News back on March 13th. Landmark ruling on uncontacted indigenous people's rights strikes at oil industry. Yes. Down in Ecuador, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights has said that the Ecuadorian government has violated the rights of the uncontacted Amazon tribes that are in the Yasuni National Park. And so basically what happened is the government told some oil companies, oh, you can go ahead and drill there. But the Tagiri, Taromanane, and Dukakieri tribes there are people are living there as they've lived for the past at least 11,000 and probably 30,000 years, living in the forest naturally. And so the court has ruled against the government of Ecuador and said, okay, not only do you have to stop all the drilling, which actually there was a referendum in Ecuador in 2023, and the country voted overwhelmingly to stop all drilling in the park, which is also a wonderful thing. But the court also said, and you have to now expand the park in order to create buffer zones around these tribes to protect them from loggers and miners. And the whole thing was sparked, the whole case was sparked because two of the native girls in these tribes were attacked by these oil workers. And so that started this whole legal chain reaction that has gone all the way up now to the Ecuador Inter-American Court of Human Rights, and the indigenous people won. So
Good.
that's great.
Good
news.
for them.
Okay, another real short story. We just got two more stories to get through here today. This was one that was in commonweal.scot, as in Scott, as in Scotland. And the title of this was Scotland Does Not Need Nuclear Power and People Aren't Being Told the Truth. And essentially what's happening in Scotland right now is the same thing Murdoch was doing in Australia. There's just this huge PR campaign to say, you know, Scotland needs nukes. But what this article pointed out, it's just important to remember this, wind and solar only cost 38 to 44 British pounds per megawatt hour, while nukes cost 150 pounds per megawatt hour. So nukes cost literally 5 times as much as wind and solar. And they reminded that the full costs are never calculated, like the cost of keeping the nuclear fuel rods clean or, you know, safe once they're out of the reactors. And I had forgotten this, that you have to isolate a nuclear fuel rod for 10 years after you take it out of the reactor, or it will just melt down. You have to continuously cool it. It's got that much energy in it, stuck in it, that if you don't continuously cool it for 10 years, it melts and starts a chain reaction again. So it was just nice to see that article. And so it's articles like that in Australia that led to the downfall of the conservatives down there. So let's hope Scotland comes to their senses too. It gets off the nuclear bandwagon. Okay, the final story. It's kind of a complex story, and it's one you probably heard something about on the mainstream media. And that is this past week, Spain had this huge crash of their grid. Their entire grid collapsed. And it was off for like almost 24 hours in some places. And what's happening is that renewables, all the conservative politicians in Europe and around the world, and Australia too, actually, although it didn't work for them, leapt on this. And they said, oh, when the grid crashed, it was 75% wind and solar.
Renewables?
Renewables, right. And therefore, they're blaming the renewables for the grid crash.
Okay.
But what actually, the problem actually is that they were relying on their nukes and their fossil, for that other 25%. They were relying on that for the grid stability.
Ooh.
Because you need, it's called inertia, basically. You have to keep everything that's putting into the grid and taking off the grid has to be zipping along at this 50 cycles per second, and it has to be continuous. And so that's what they claim they need base load for. But what actually they found out in South Australia, where they're already at 75% wind and solar all the time, and they're going to be 100% wind and solar in 2 years, is that in order to keep the grid balanced, you need both batteries to like if there's a sudden drop off. You can kick the batteries in really quick, in microseconds actually, and you keep the grid stable. And you also need something called synchronous condensers, which these are kind of like generators. Like you might have seen the pictures of the big generators at places like Niagara Falls or Hoover Dam that are just continuously spinning. Well, that continuous mechanical spinning at 60 cycles per second, that's what keeps the grid stable. And so if you don't have enough of that, then the timing can be off on all the different generators and users. And if your generators are putting in power at different cycles, and those waveforms don't match up, they can start canceling out, and you can actually eliminate the power. And so that can cause the whole grid to crash. So what they found in South Australia is you just get these synchronous condensers, which are essentially, they spin like the generators, but they don't use any energy. There's no fuel that keeps them spinning. They're literally just physically spinning to create a reference for all the other generators to use to say, oh, okay, here's the top of the cycle, here's the bottom of the cycle at the 60 cycles per second that you need to run a grid. And so it was not the fact that they had all those renewables. It was the fact that they didn't synchronize everything. They didn't have enough battery backup. And it also demonstrates that the nuclear and the fossil, which were supposed to be providing the base load to keep everything stable, they failed.
Oh,
And
okay.
so it's more a failure of the myth of base load than it is the fact that they had lots of wind and sun.
Makes sense.
And this is demonstrated like in California every day, where they get 100% plus of their power from just wind and solar. So that's it. So things are happening. Good things are happening around the world. We're happy to report on all of it for you. Thanks for listening. That's it for this week. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
We are signing off.
I don't want no oil spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!